Welcome to the ZeroInOnUnite podcast, where we keep the energy high and the molding low. All right, trainers, time to take a break from Duncan Aos and zero in with your host, Zero.
Welcome in, trainers, one and all, for a very late but very special edition of the ZeroInOnUnite podcast. Hello, it is me, your host, Zero In on Alex, and today we have one of the best, a two-time back-to-back Pokemon Unite World Champion, a member of one of the biggest esports organizations in 2025, who went on to win LAIC, EUIC, and NAIC. We have what is considered the GOAT of the best in the West. That is Overlord. Welcome to the show, my guy.
Hello, everyone. Yeah, of course. Appreciate you having me on. Yeah, I'm excited.
Dude, it is an honor. It is a privilege to have you. First and foremost, to get this all out of the way, all the fun stuff. Hello, if you're watching this on Spotify or on YouTube, hello. Again, we are available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, and over at the Unite Academy. But Overlord, welcome on in. You're kind of known as the best in the world, period. How does it feel to have that type of title here, available, that you are considered one of the best, not only to do it ever, but now in a region where you're probably only going to level up even more?
Yeah, of course. I'd say there's, a lot of cool and bad things about it, for sure. Obviously it's very, honoring. It's very, cool to, be considered up there as, one of the best to ever touch the game.
Mm-hmm.
But I think with that, there also comes, a lot of expectations and pressure and whatnot.
Yeah.
But I like to think of, having expectations as like kind of like a blessing more than a curse.
Okay.
Kind of just being expected to, achieve certain things, I guess. Like being or trying to, exceed expectations or kind of like accomplish more than what I've already accomplished. Just kind of, what helps keep me motivated, to keep grinding, to keep, getting better and to, try to, continue to be the best. So
I love that, man. And obviously you've been in the game since year one. You went on to win year one and year two, but like there had to be a point in time. What was the Overlord before that? Like, how did your journey go from Pokemon Unite not existing to then existing, and then it was something that you became competitive in? Like, just give us a glimpse of what that was like.
Yeah, I mean, I think when the game came out back in like 2021, I think the summer of 2021.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I think that was like the summer break of my junior year in high school.
It's okay, man. I'm old. It's okay. It's okay. It's okay.
That was, I'm pretty like, there was like COVID during the time. So, there wasn't too much school and everything. So, we were pretty much in our rooms all day,
Yeah.
What else we're going to do? Play video games, I guess.
Well.
So, I got hooked on the game from a few friends that introduced me to it. I was always like a fan of Pokemon, but I was never like too big into like the MOBA scene, I guess. A lot of people always ask me like, is it your first MOBA? If you have like previous MOBA experience? I always like, to be honest, not really. Like I played, a few games before, mostly for fun, but nothing like super serious. But yeah, I mean, when the first week of the game coming out, there's a lot of, like servers being formed of like, I guess like hitting matches at the time was like pretty difficult compared to how it is now.
Complete night and day different. Night and day different, man.
Night and day, 100%. I remember back then it was like you'd win a game for like plus like 4 elo and you'd lose 20.
You'd like 20. It's like you literally could not drop a game. Like being a master player,
it was
actually
crazy.
Meant master.
Oh yeah, no, 100% back then. But I think something that was like unique is like with a lot of ranked games, it's kind of like solo duo ranked is what it limits it to.
Yeah.
But in Unite, the main focus I feel like was kind of around 5 stacks, like full parties.
Yeah.
I thought that was kind of interesting to me. So I would always be playing like 5 stacks, my friends and whatnot, and some of the people I met online. And I think that's probably why I stuck with the game, because in my opinion, it made it a lot more fun. as opposed, kind of grinding solo duo all day in ranked.
With the randos that have just somehow never evolved from
I
what
know,
like
yeah.
I know I say like, oh man, it's in the trenches nowadays. Not much has changed really.
No, I feel like the last 2 years, like nothing much has changed with the randoms and solo queue. But yeah, I mean, I kind of started just in like a for fun team, I guess. And it was like, mostly for fun, but we were trying to play like a competitive, because that was back like every weekend there's a kind of like a grassroots tournament, and there's no WCS at the time, so every single team was always playing in. They're always super competitive, which I thought was pretty fun. And eventually, I kind of just met a few people in the scene, and I started getting connections. One of the first people I met actually was like Big Uzi.
Uzi!
He's a pretty
I love Uzi, dude.
Shout out to Uzi.
Shout out to
Uzi.
I
guess he was kind of like the first, like, I guess, like, person I met in the scene that was kind of like involved with everything.
Really?
And he was, kind of the person that kind of introduced me to, my future teammates, which was like Ascendance at the time, which is, Curious, Jungle Book.
For those of you that didn't know, it wasn't always Luminosity Gaming. It was like Ascended, and then there was also Blackhand that year.
Blackhand,
If you know Blackhand, you're an OG. If you don't know Blackhand, nah, get out of here.
Yeah, but I kind of was introduced to them right around the time WCS was announced, and that was when I think like Slash and Curious kind of reached out, and they're like, "Yo, you wanna make a team and try to compete in this thing?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure." And like 3 months in, we were like getting like pretty decent results, like consistently around top 4. But then I think after AOS Cup at the time, we ended up making roster changes to what was our finalized roster that ended up winning Worlds. And I think that's kind of where it was like, once we brought in Elo and Jungle Book, I kind of think that's when everyone was like, okay, I think like we genuinely have a chance of like doing something, right? I think this roster is very strong, so I think give it all we can, see what happens.
Yeah, I feel like a majority of people have always seen you, Curios, and Slashcan as kind of like the core, right? Like the heart and soul. And then when JB and Elo got added on, it was like, wait a minute. They're like basically unstoppable, and they're working really well together. Like, I know even early on, I was a big fan of JB because he's the whole reason why I've ever picked up Cinderace in the first place. You are the reason I picked up Serena, because I was like, dude, this guy's going bananas. Like, I still remember where like basically team comps were the same at Worlds. Like, you gotta take Dragonite, you gotta take Serena, and like there was so many like I can't believe there was a point in time where bans and picks were not a thing.
Yeah, I know, right?
Like, when you look
crazy
back,
to think about.
like how did that ever get there? Like how was that ever allowed? But obviously you were specialized in a top laner, the all-arounder role, if you will. Is that something that came like naturally to you, or is that like, well, this is what these guys want to play this, so I guess I'll play this? Like, where did the top lane, you being the top laner, come from?
To be honest, it kind of happened when I was, I guess, like forced on the role.
Hey man, it happened.
So I actually, like, funny enough, when I first started the game, I actually played mostly attackers.
Oh, really?
So I was actually playing, like the A9, the Cramorant, the Gardevoir when it came out and whatnot, which is kind of funny to think about.
Yeah.
But at the time when our Greninja was another big one that I loved to play back then.
Big one, yeah.
Like, back when Greninja was still
the best.
Good in the meta.
You know what's crazy is that there's probably like a parallel universe somewhere where it's like, who is the best? Instead of like, because right now, like in terms of like central area players or junglers and top laners, you and Trainer are always like, I've always heard you two are the best. I've always said that, but I'm also biased because I really enjoy your gameplay, and Trainer and I are actually good buddies. But so there's a world out there where it's like, who's the best attacker, Flareon's or Overlord? That would have been crazy because I again, for those of you who are listening, we do a live stream, and Flareons is in the chat saying, "What the hell?" Once we talked about being an attacker, like, what do you mean? You know, which again, it's crazy to say because you know, being a Gardevoir, the level 10 Gardevoir days.
God, the level 10 Gardevoir.
I had to bring that up.
That
you know?
was so bad.
So like, so you were kind of forced into the role, but did you do anything like mentally or to get accustomed to it, or
To be honest, I mean, like, top lane at the time, it wasn't even known as top lane. It's just known as the Lucario lane because that was the only character that was playable up there. Yeah. And I think, you know, it was like our top lane ended up quitting, so I ended up, you know, switching to top and kind of filling that role.
Gotcha.
But you know, a lot of people were really playing mostly power up punch at the time.
Yeah.
And you know, I absolutely hated playing the moveset.
Yeah, I know. You were the one guy who's like, I refuse.
I was like, I just don't want to play this. But I was like, I just want to play E-Speed. This moveset is so fun. I think it's really kind of what got me addicted to playing Unite a lot and kind of, you know, continuing. And you know, I mean, basically for like 4 months after that, I was basically just known as the E-Speed guy, basically, because that's all I would play. I would only just play E-Speed Lucario.
Everybody knew you as the E-Speed Lucario. I mean, I was also going to even bring up, do you remember the 113 days on Remote Stadium?
Yeah,
was that something that you remember / have any recollection of?
Oh, yeah. 100%. I think 113 was like probably up there for like how much fun I had playing the game. I definitely enjoyed, you know, the 1v1 back then. And even though, you know, it could get stale, you know, with the base just being Lucario versus Lucario.
Right.
I still thought it was like pretty fun, because when it's 1v1, I think there's a lot of like identity when it comes to, you know, top laners and how they play the lane. So when you're playing against like different players, you know, that have like different strengths in lane, I think the lane felt honestly like pretty fresh every time you play it. And you know, I guess it was just kind of cool, you know, Lucario versus Lucario, no advantages, no disadvantages. Just full skill matchup playing the same character.
I think that's the key point right there. It was a skill. Like, I know that the term is like, oh, it really was, though, a skill diff. Like, that was really the actual thing that made a difference, you know? And again, we're still part of the introduction. If you're just tuning in right now, we are interviewing Overlord, the GOAT. But that being said, though, you know, obviously the biggest and latest news is that you are no longer in NA. Recently, I'll even, you know, talk about this briefly, is recently Spraggles and I cried 100%, totally was not a fake cry whatsoever, but we totally cried on stream during his tournament, be like, man, Overlord abandoned us, you know, it's okay. It's fine. That actually did happen, though. We were casting together for his tournament, and at one point we're like, you know, because we were talking, I think we were talking about Chris Smith and how, like, you know, maybe he's something, because he plays a lot of Pokemon similar to you. And so we're like, is this the next coming? And then he was like, yeah, because Overlord left us. Like, it's okay, you know, we're gonna get through it. We'll be okay, you know, it's okay. But you know, getting back on track a little bit of this is that, again, you are no longer in NA. Do you want to kind of break down the fact that, you know, you're in Japan and you have been picked up by one of, if not the most highly anticipated team in the East?
Yeah.
Rep that jersey, man. Rep it. Like, he's wearing it.
Oh, yeah.
Reject, baby. I mean, what? No favoritism. How does it feel to be part of Reject?
Oh, honestly, it's obviously, you know, great. I'm very, you know, grateful to them, you know, helping me out, because, you know, it was definitely, you know, there's a lot of you know, a big process that comes into, you know, bringing a player over, you know, especially from like, you know, from the States all the way over to Japan. But I mean, to be honest, I kind of just like, you know, I talked about my interest in, you know, playing in Japan a lot last year. And you know, a lot of people kind of asked me how it happened, and like, if I'm being honest, like, I kind of just reached out to a lot of, you know, Japanese orgs and everything, you know, and I started talking to Reject, and you know, that basically just everything, you know, just happened to work out. Nice. I think they kind of provided everything that I was looking for in Unite. Obviously, the roster is absolutely talented. You know, I think going into Worlds, they're probably considered by a lot of people to be, favorites to even win.
Yeah.
At least by a lot to be, have a very solid placement. Top 3, top 4 was probably like expected of them. And I think it was definitely deserved. Their team is 100% very talented. Obviously before I ended up joining. But I think something that Reject kind of encapsulates as well is just overall like enjoyment as well.
Good.
Just kind of like talking to like the staff and meeting the players on the team for the first time. I definitely think it was a place I would have the most fun. What I think is also equally as important as to like winning and everything.
Right.
I guess it's like the main difference for me because a lot of people are asking like, oh, what is like? Have you like think about maybe joining Fennel or joining Zeta?
Right, because like
teams?
there's a lot of teams out there in the East
Yeah.
that have like a big name to them.
But yeah, I mean, Reject were super super helpful. Getting me over, so I'm very grateful for that. And of course, I think just simply, I think I have the most fun, and the most enjoyment playing on this team. So
Right. I mean, selfishly, I can definitely say we are going to miss you, but also in the same respect, I want you to do great. A lot of these players that I've interviewed, I have some sort of personal relationship in some way, shape, or form. And at the end of the day, this is a game, and I want the players to do well. And I think due to the fact that you're going from North America, a household name in North America, everybody knows who Overlord is. So to now make that giant step to the East and then being on a team like Reject, I mean, I know LAIC is on the horizon and the ACL League is on the horizon as well, but just knowing that that's on the horizon is just so exciting. And again, want to wish you nothing but the best. But now, I know we could be here all day, and honestly, I've been having so much fun chatting about with you. But again, this also I do want to keep it somewhat educational. So like, again, we touched briefly that you were the top laner, and again, a majority of the time you were either the jungler or the top laner. I know this last year, especially with Trainer being on Luminosity, he got to take over that, so you got to go back and just be perma top lane. So for players who might not understand top lane deeply, how would, in your own words, describe the main responsibilities of a top lane player, specifically in competitive play?
Yeah, so I think top lane is probably one of the more interesting roles in competitive. I think it's mostly due to the fact that I think top lane probably has one of the widest champ pools and in terms of what Pokemon can really be played in the role.
Right.
And depending on the meta, I think I can kind of change a little bit of like the responsibilities and identity of the lane. Right. There's certain metas where maybe top laners favor more kind of like tanky defensive Pokemon, and there's some metas where maybe they favor more like speedster and like more aggressive like type of like all-arounders and whatnot. But it's like as a top laner, like your main responsibilities are kind of mostly being the rock on the team, kind of like being like the stable point of the team, if that makes sense. And you don't have to go out there and make crazy plays and be the damage carry. Of course, you have like your jungler and ADC. even though you can, you definitely can still. But I think it's important to kind of just be stable and kind of help control the top side of the map, I guess, and kind of just be a stable point for the team. Whether that's holding pads, right? Maybe if your other carries, your bottom carry, jungle carry, want to go out and play more of the map. I think it's more the top laner's responsibility to kind of sit back and kind of hold the pads. And as well, I guess it changed a lot with this year actually with the Regieleki kind of being flip-flopped. I think it was the top laner's responsibility, to kind of like identify when you should make pushes with the Regieleki. I think that was something super crucial. I actually think that's something that kind of evolved throughout a lot this year with macro. With a lot of competitive teams, they started kind of playing more towards the Regieleki top side. But obviously it's a bit different now with the Regis kind of like flip-flopping. But yeah, I mean that's basically my take on top right now.
I love that take. I think one of the questions that I personally want to ask is, and this was the question that I think I had, maybe not even a question, it was like an assumption. And maybe you can tell us, was there ever a point in time this specifically talking about this past year, were you and Trainer were ever like trying to see who could do the most damage and or KOs? Was that ever a thing?
Maybe a little for fun, you know.
Yeah.
I'd say like probably not so much in scrims, but like you know
Right.
when we're like practicing like
Right.
ladder and you know, oh of course all the time, you know. I actually think the main thing was, you know, since me and Trainer are known as, you know, pretty like aggressive
Yeah.
players on the map. What ended up happening is Curious would kind of be left in that role where he would end up being kind of like the anchor for the team. And you know, the way, you know, like slashes and everything, every time Slash, you know, play maybe like Snorlax or something to end up doing more damage than Curious because he would kind of be like stable on the bot side. Slash would always have to make a remark after the game like, yo, Curious, yo, get your damage up. What are you doing? And Curious would always have to respond back and they'd go back and forth. It was funny.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, because I think for me, especially just watching competitive Pokemon Unite since the very beginning, since you guys were ascended and then became Blackhand and then winning it all, staying up late and just watching that in awe, you know, and then to then see like, oh my god, Trainer and Overlord on the same team. Like I was making the argument like that is the best 1-2 punch in North America. Like that almost feels illegal to have those two together. But that was just something always in my mind. I'm like, there's got to be at least at some point in time, maybe not on stage, maybe not in scrims, but when they're like trying to like get comfortable with the Pokemon, there had to be a little bit of ego. There had to be. These two are both way too aggressive to not have that. But going back to now the competitive side of things, would you say are some of the key qualities that make someone an elite top laner, and what should players develop first in that top role? And obviously, I know that's a little bit of open-ended because it depends on the Pokemon, but just like a foundation of key qualities makes an elite top laner, and what should they try to develop first?
So I guess this is my take for like this year, with kind of, you know, all the map changes and whatnot. I actually think the most important thing is kind of learning the laning phase and kind of perfecting the first 3 minutes of the game. Because you know, compared to last year, now you have, you know, the Regidrago that spawns at 8 minutes in mid.
Right.
Obviously, you know, the Regis are kind of swap. You don't know which is going to be top, which is going to be bottom. And of course, you know, just overall the lane layout as well on top lane, you know, changed a lot compared to last year's map. So I'd say like kind of just learning the lane and trying to get comfortable on a lane with like multiple characters is going to be very important this year for a lot of top laners. And as well as kind of just getting comfortable with knowing when it's a good idea to kind of leave your lane.
Yeah.
Because, you know, I'd say like right now, the meta for competitive is a lot of times teams end up kind of grouping, and there's a lot more importance held on the bot tier ones than there are on the top tier ones. So a lot of fights kind of end up, you know, revolving around there, the team fights and whatnot. And I think on the top lane, you know, it's kind of up to you to, you know, make the decision of like, okay, do I, you know, need to go bot to help assist my team? Do I need to, you know, maybe stay in the off lane? And you kind of have these like more so like macro decisions, not like decisions where it's like you have to be super fast, you know, like in the moment, like, oh, I have to do this,
Right.
you know, it's kind of like, okay, this is probably like objective spawn in 30 seconds. My team's fighting bot. What am I gonna do? You know,
Right.
And you kind of have, you know, 30 seconds to kind of, you know,
make
the decision, right? Yeah, exactly.
Gotcha. And I mean, again, I know I have picked up certain Pokemon because of you in that, and like, again, I hope that when people listen to this, it's like they take this as, you know, good advice. Again, it's not the end all be all, but again, I've said this before, you kind of have the credibility available, right? I mean, you won UIC, LAIC, and NAIC last year. You're back-to-back world champion. Yeah, just minor things, you know. But in that top lane, in the same way that you have those qualities, what would you say is like a priority within the first, I don't know, 2 or 3 minutes of a game?
So yeah, I mean, I think in the first, you know, couple minutes of I guess before the game even starts, right? If you're in draft and whatnot, I think it's like very good to, you know, kind of assess the lane and kind of see, you know, how you think it'll play out, how you want the lane to play out. So like, for example, if you see the loading screen, the enemy team maybe you're playing with like a Blissey and the other team has like a Hoopa, right? They have the support advantage at A-Press early game. You kind of have to take that into account. As well as, you know, kind of like the enemy jungler as well, right? The farm and top lane spawns pretty late now. A lot of times you're going to be fighting over the farm to like 9:20, 9:10, and a lot of times a jungler will actually make it to your lane. I think, you know, jungle ganks are going to be a lot more prevalent this year. So, you know, that's also something to kind of think about is like, you know, maybe their junglers are really fast clearing jungler, right? And you can make it to my lane at like 9:20 and I can't really get assistance from mine. You know, maybe that, you know, tells you like, okay, yeah, I have to play safe, right? I think, you know, trying to minimize early deaths is going to be something super important this season. I think it's also, you know, probably, you know, as simple as it sounds, I think it's also like probably one of the hardest things to master, right? Because you don't just want to, you know, give the enemy, you know, all the farm in the lane, you know, not contest. So I think trying to like kind of find that balance between like aggressiveness and, you know, also being safe as well.
Right. How would you then say, like, let's take an example then. Let's give an example, especially for a Pokemon that I know you play really, really well and that I admire. I think out of all the Pokemon that you use, this is the Pokemon that I tend to favor more, and I kind of would hope to reach at least a quarter of the skill that you have. Blaziken. Let's take Blaziken. A Pokemon that has obviously a later scale type evolution line. I mean, it's not fully online to level 8, but it is online at level 7, and you can do some stuff with Combusken. How would you then take a Pokemon like Torchic, who starts off in the top lane? You know, just again, there's a lot of variables, but what is like your mental approach or just your approach in general when playing something like Blaziken in the top lane?
So I guess like when I'm loading into the game as Blaziken, the first thing you're probably thinking about is, you know, all right, can we contest the enemy team on farm, or is their, you know, fighting power early game just too strong for us to fight, right?
Right.
Blaziken actually is a pretty decent brawler early game with the passive. And of course, you know, you have the option to run like Focus Band on it as well to help with like the early game. But I'd say the thing that Torchic or Blaziken, I guess, kind of struggles with the most early game is it's not very good at scoring. So you don't have many options in lane. So like, for example, there's a lot of, you know, characters in lane where, you know, if the enemy team is a really strong, you know, first bunny that spawns, you know, at the 940 mark, a lot of top laners sometimes just opt like, all right, let's just give it. I'm just going to go score, get my first stack, and then kind of just leave, right? Torchic doesn't really have that option, I guess, unless you want to burn your eject button really early on.
Yeah, because all you have is like, what is it, Aerial Ace, that little move that he can kind of dash?
Yeah, and then it's on a really long cooldown as well. So unless you want to burn your eject early, it's, you know, not the greatest. Sometimes it's okay. But I'd say like your main focus is actually probably going to be mostly on working with your jungler and communication. When you're playing characters that don't have too much, I guess, control over the lane, like Torchic, for example, I think it's kind of, you know, on, you know, your support and jungler, maybe even like defender, you know, if they want to make a roam top lane, and kind of like calling, you know, what you need from them. And you're like, hey, you know, like I need so-and-so resources, you know, I need a cap, or like, hey, this guy just blew his eject button. Can we please, you know, go top and look for a kill window, right? I think those are like probably actually more important on Blaziken. On the lane phase more so than like micro, if anything.
Sorry, there was a reason I was laughing, because I kid you not, what you were saying was exactly, and I'm not picking on anyone, I swear I'm not. I feel like we might have earlier, but Flareon said the exact same thing about attackers and communicating. But, and this is the caveat, right? Because he was like, yeah, you know, you got to communicate with your jungler, and like, hey, I need that to reach my level 13 or whatever. But then he's like, now granted, I just kind of sometimes BM and just take it anyways, regardless if I'd communicate or not. And I'm like, God damn it. So when you were saying that, all I could hear was Flareon's voice is like, yeah, I'm just going to take that. Like, not even communicate that, like, I need it. Like, he was just like, what, you don't see that I'm, like, low leveled? Like, I clearly needed that. I'm taking it. And it's like, God damn it. So that's why I was laughing. But no, I think you're right. Like, especially for a Pokemon like that, communication is going to always be key. Especially to be able to like have a Pokemon that has a late scale like Blaziken available to you. We talked about the early game. So now as a top laner, what impact should you be having in the mid to the late game? I know you already talked about how you should be kind of the rock, right? The centerpiece, kind of holding the team together. But now in a more realistic mid to late game, what is the role there?
So yeah, I think with your top lane, something that's kind of like, actually not looked at so much, is I think it's actually very important to have good communication with your defender. Because I think the top lane defender are most of the time probably the two that are kind of like sitting on pads, kind of holding, watching off lanes or back caps or not. Because often they tend to be the most tanky characters, kind of like a little bit self-sufficient, that can kind of hold those pads, maybe in like man disadvantage pushes and whatnot. But I'd say like as top lane during the mid and late game, I think it's important to look to be available for your teammates. And what I mean by that is kind of, try to be in a spot where you can, assist like your attacker or assist your jungler, right? Maybe if your jungler wants to make, an aggressive call, right? Or whoever's making the call.
Right.
I think it's, also important to kind of, put, say, your inputs on it, right? And then also kind of, being available for that push, right? Maybe, your jungler wants to go for an invade, maybe being available, it's like, all right, you can follow up with your jungler, communicating that is something that's going to be super important during the mid game and whatnot. And then also as well, I think depending on the game state as well, like if you're in winning game states and whatnot, I think, if you want to be like more aggressive and kind of more like active in the communication, I think you can also kind of like start to call more pushes on your side of the map, maybe if you see like a window or, like a top tier 2 push, for example, right? I think a lot of top laners can kind of be more proactive and start calling more of that. And, even if it doesn't work out, in practice, I think it's still great, to just make those calls and just kind of, learn, right? And kind of like see, when it's good to make those pushes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then, of course, as a top lane, like I think, it's very important to be good at making those communications, because a lot of times top laners are kind of, intertwined with defenders when it comes to kind of making the first contact in a lot of fights and a lot of skirmishes. So you kind of have a lot of, control in your hands and kind of like how the macro wants to be played. So I'd say, for a lot of top lanes, kind of like try experimenting more with being aggressive and, trying to make more macro calls. And, even if like, don't be afraid to like make a mistake or something, right? Because I think, learning and everything is.
Yeah, a lot of the times that's where you learn the most. And I think I really want to say that was either Kratos or Adesu that said that basically like, don't be afraid to make the mistakes, because in those mistakes is probably where you could learn the most. Unfortunately, you're talking about an ideal situation. And let's be real, most people on ladder do not want to look in the mirror and be like, it's not my fault. I died. Clearly, it's my team's fault. I did nothing wrong. Unfortunately, that is, a very common mindset. But I like the fact that you're willing to break it down and be like, no, don't be afraid to make those mistakes. Maybe it works out, maybe it doesn't. And maybe you can, at bare minimum, learn something from it and then take that knowledge and maybe use it in the next game. And this kind of goes into my next question, which was kind of like, you being a top laner and maybe just as a player, either one, as a player yourself in growth, or two, however you want to answer this, maybe other top laners that you've seen this, what are common mistakes that you see that kind of happens? Maybe they're not the rock. What are some common mistakes that you might see either you and yourself have made that then improved on, or that you see other top laners try to make and it just doesn't work out?
So I guess like as the games going on and then betas can be evolved, I definitely think a mistake is, I'm not saying don't do it, because I'm a big fan of doing it myself, but I'd say try to probably look for less solo plays, I guess. It can be very tempting, if you're playing like Buzzwole, for example, and your eject button's up, it can be very tempting to just want to just run at them and kind of just press the button and just just
Why
go,
you calling
right?
me out? Why you calling me out, man? Because I know when I have the eject button, I get so hungry. I'm looking at it, I'm like, hey, yo, get over here. What's that? You're a little too far. Let me superpower you back. Where you going, baby? You ain't going nowhere.
Oh my god. Yeah, I mean, I'm one of the biggest culprits myself too. I see my Jake button up, I see my full heal up on like Lucario. I'm like, yeah, I'm going in. I'm going for summon.
Right.
And solo plays, I think if you see the window, I'm not saying don't go for them. But it's like in this meta, it's kind of a lot more risky, and I think you can
Right.
kind of get like punished a lot more.
Mm-hmm.
With kind of I guess the macro just kind of evolving a little bit more as well, kind of just like getting better throughout the years. So you're going to be punished a lot more for mistakes like that.
Right.
Um, but I'd say like as well, like the big difference is the best top laners kind of know how to maintain their lead without much risk, I guess,
Right.
if that makes sense. So what I don't mean like maintain the lead, but like constantly playing the enemy side, putting yourself at risk to die, maybe trying to like contest their farm. But it's like a lot like the best top laners are very good at like when they're given a small lead, right? Maybe
Yeah.
it starts from lane, right? Maybe they're given a lead from a jungler in the first minute after
Right.
like a gank. They're very very good at kind of maintaining that lead, holding that lead, and kind of slowly just like making it feel like like you can't play the game a little bit, right?
Right. Right.
Because they're
Right.
kind of just like they're not really giving you any windows of like aggression, but they're also keeping it balanced with
Mm-hmm.
like keeping you on your side, kind of like starving you a farm and whatnot. And I think that's like something that a lot of top laners kind of miss on a little bit, is kind of when they're
Yeah.
given leads, a lot of times they're not exactly sure how to like keep the lead, or maybe they go too aggressive and give a bad comeback kill that kind of like flip
Right.
the momentum of the game. So I think that's probably like one of the most important things for top laners is kind of like get good at.
Okay. Yeah, no, I think that's good. Again, because I think one of the things that a lot of people struggle with, and I think this works in every aspect, I'm not trying to get too deep here, but it's like criticism, right?
Mhm.
Knowing which again, I felt called out, but I can't help myself. If I have my eject button with Buzzwole, I just don't want to
Yeah.
superpower them. What do you want me to do? I think I will say I don't think there's a worse feeling than ejecting and then missing superpower.
And then
'Cause-
missing
Oh,
or it goes backwards.
yes.
Oh god.
Oh my god. And then I'm just like, when they ask you if you're fine, but you're not really fine. And I'm like, oh, because now what? What do I do now? Like I'm just
Oh man, but
I'm quite literally a dead bug at that point.
It's
you know?
just-
Big muscles
swear-
but small brain.
I swear on Buzzwole as well. It's always the you miss your eject and you're just like, oh crap. I don't know. And then you just panic press your old button and your old button misses. And then you like do that. You're stuck in the animation of flying out and then landing back. And you're just like, oh my god, bro.
Okay,
Like,
so you know the pain.
I'm just gonna leave. I think everybody that's played that character has at least experienced that a couple times.
And as we're hearing from Dr. Caro,
Yeah.
she's actually my duo. And then your support slash defender has to die for your
I
sin.
said,
She does that a lot for me. Thank you. I appreciate it because she knows. Because again, when usually she and I duo, I will usually be an all arounder and she'll be either support or defender. And 9 times out of the 10, maybe like 12 times out of 10, actually, she's yelling at me to either pull back or I'll be like, nah, I'm going in. Give me that Blissey ult. I'm going in, baby. And sometimes it works out. But a lot of the time, she's just ends up dying, and she'll be like, "Just run," and I'm like, "Okay, bye." Like without even hesitation, I'm like, "All right, cool, I guess." So again, criticism is good. We've all experienced a lot of these things, but moving forward, this is going to be a 2-part question. First part is, what would you say is like top 3 laners for newbies? The part 2 will be for pro, like competitive. But what would you say if like somebody right now is listening and they're like, you know what? I'd really like to try all-arounder / top lane, or in general, because again, we've had Blastoise top lane. That's been a thing. There's been different metas of that, of what can be played in top lane. But right now, in the year of 2025, November 10th, what would you say are like 3 at least newbies that maybe are relatively easy to pick up?
So I'd say that my number one recommendation is Zacian. And I think it's probably gonna be that for a while. I feel like Zacian's always, kind of been like a staple pick in the meta. It's never really been bad since the release, and since it's been eligible in competitive play. But the nice thing about Zacian is that it kind of, is one of the strongest laners. Of course, I think if you're starting top lane, I think, kind of sticking to more like the stronger laners to kind of like learn the lane and help is nice.
That makes
But
sense.
what's nice about Zacian is it kind of has the tools to do everything
Yeah.
almost, right? You know, I think it's obviously his lane is very strong, but I think it also gives you opportunity to kind of be creative as well. So, you know, for example, I think like Zacian is one of the characters that's like, you know, if your top lane is going very well, you can just run to the enemy jungle.
Yeah.
You know, you can just run to the enemy jungle, look for invades, and kind of, you know, like it kind of teaches you, I guess, how to, like snowball a lead, if that makes sense.
Gotcha.
Because Zacian is one of the characters, like one of the few characters that's very strong early game, but also is like very good scaling into the late game as well. Um, so I think, you know, Zacian will kind of teach a lot of players, you know, obviously lane fundamentals, but I think it also allows, you know, players to kind of explore and kind of be creative on the map
Right.
and see, you know, when would be a good time to do this, when would be a good time, you know, to, you know, play aggressive, maybe
Right.
play defensive. And then also Zacian is just one of the strongest side laners in the game, being
Yeah.
able to, you know, basically rip objectives by itself.
Yeah.
It is very nice, and having a secure tool in your ult as well is also very useful. So Zacian, pretty much the character that can do everything, honestly.
I like that because
Um,
you're right. And I didn't mean to cut you off there because I still want to hear two
yeah.
other maybe newbie ones, but it's true. Zacian, it has all the tools for a beginner to learn, right? It can get objectives by itself. It can secure relatively well. And then having that intrepid sword, especially even in the early game, having a dash in quick attack and then using intrepid sword to boost up your slash or something. I think, yeah, I think, and then like you said, even its Unite move, having a good secure, it has all the good tools to be good. But yeah, two other newbie Pokemon that might be easy to learn. And again, I know because in total it's like 6 whole total Pokemon. But as somebody who does well in top lane, I think a lot of people would be interested to know.
Mhm. I think for my second pick, I'd probably choose Blastoise right now.
Ooh, okay.
I guess like more specifically the rapid spin hydro pump moveset.
Mm-hmm.
And I think obviously Blastoise is, you know, one of the strongest laners in the game. And I think what's nice about Blast is that it kind of teaches you how to have impact on characters that aren't, you know, maybe like say like engaged characters like Buzzwole, or maybe like, you know, kind of more carries like Blaziken.
Mm-hmm.
Because, you know, I hear like a lot of top laners kind of don't like playing defenders, like defender Pokemon, because they kind of like, oh, I don't have much impact on the game, I guess.
Right.
Is, you know, what a lot of them say. Which I actually think isn't very true. I think Blastoise is one of the most impactful top laners.
A lot of people are
if
picking
played
it right now. Yeah.
Yeah, I think its lane is very strong. It's very simple. It's very easy. You know, being a ranged top laner is, you know, a great advantage. But I think Blastoise kind of teaches you how to be a little bit more defensive. You know, kind of play more with your team, around your team.
Right.
And, you know, being very, you know, tanky, and, you know, being able to hold side lanes very well. You know, you can stall pushes, you know, for 30 seconds, you know, until your team comes. And then also, Blastoise is probably one of, if not like the strongest character, like power spikes at level 13.
Yeah.
Once you get that rapid spin plus, which basically like doubles, triples your defenses when you rapid spin.
And let's wait, and it's Unite move Hydro Typhoon. Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
The knockup that and the plays you can make with that. Like,
oh yeah, 100%. I think Blastoise kind of teaches you how to be, you know, defensive while also, you know, kind of prioritizing, you know, your own scaling as well. So you're not just like full sacrificing, you know, I'm just gonna sit on this pad for my team the whole game.
Right.
It kind of, you know, tells you, because like if you're not hitting 13 on Blastoise at the end fight, it can definitely feel pretty bad.
Yeah.
You're definitely gonna be poked out. It's very hard to engage.
Right.
But I think, you know, if your lane phases well, you know, you're good at holding the pads, but you're also kind of, you know, telling your team like, yo, like I kind of need some resources. I kind of need some farm, you know, to scale a little bit. I think Blastoise is a great pick that kind of teaches you that.
Okay. And do you have a third for the newbies out there? Which again, if anybody wants to learn, so far we have Zacian, Blastoise, and maybe another one for the early newbies to pick up.
I would probably just stick with. I was thinking either Lucario or Leafeon.
Ooh, whoa, okay. Leafeon is not one I expected, but I can understand it because at level 4 it's already kind of good.
I think Leafeon's a bit. kind of like after you kind of have the fundamentals down, I think it'd be very strong. So I'd probably just go with, just Lucario for now.
Okay.
Lucario is kind of just like the staple, like almost like default top lane, I guess.
Yeah.
Like I feel like if there's like a tutorial for top lane,
It should
like,
be
Pokemon Unite would just give you Lucario. Like it's basically like the tutorial Pokemon of like how to play top lane. It has all the tools, has a good secure, has decent fight potential in lane, it's pretty tanky. And I think Lucario is kind of a character that you probably want to focus mostly on limiting, like kind of knowing like your limits and kind of knowing how aggressive you kind of be in lane phase. Because Lucario, is probably one of the most notorious characters when it comes, playing with attack rate, right? So needing the stacks early game. And I think it's also one of the most punishing characters because if you don't get those stacks early game, it can feel very bad to play the character late game.
Yeah. Which is why I don't play it. I'm trying. To be fair, I have been trying to learn it a little bit more. So because I can see the potential, but when I don't get my stacks, feels bad, man.
Oh, it feels awful, yeah. But I think Lucario kind of teaches you, how to be aggressive, and can kind of, help you, I guess limit test almost a little bit in knowing like when you can go for certain plays and whatnot. And a nice thing about Lucario compared to like some of the other notorious stacking characters is that it can kind of make these plays by itself. You don't really need, a lot of help from like a jungler or like a roam or whatnot.
Right.
You can kind of make these plays happen by yourself, which I think is, very nice to have. So yeah, I think Lucario would probably be my third recommended character.
So again, if you want to learn, you have Zacian, you have Lucario, and you have Blastoise, which I think are all three solid to begin. Maybe because we are getting closer to the end of the show, maybe a little quicker on the competitive. And again, obviously metas are going to change, right? Like that's, but maybe these are other three that you should still know because they have a high skill ceiling, maybe.
Yeah. I'd say my number one character for competitive play in top lane is Dodrio.
Oh, baby.
This character
that is a high skill ceiling.
It has one of the highest skill ceilings in the game. It hasn't been nerfed in like a year, and I think it's probably one of those broken characters in the game. But Dodrio is basically the character that can take over the game if you know what you're doing. And it plays a lot around tempo. Obviously with Dodrio's unique mechanic being basically the fastest Pokemon in the game.
Yep.
You can kind of control the map. You have self-sustain, so you can stay on the map. You don't really need to recall too much. You don't need too much help from your support. And of course, Dodrio has, so much skill ceiling. There's so much potential with plays.
So good.
I definitely think it's one of the strongest Pokemon competitive. For sure.
I hate that thing so much. So much. And now there's clearly a reason why. Number two.
For number two, I would probably go right now Serena.
Ooh, material.
I think it's a good one. Serena obviously has the limitations of being kind of weak until it's level 6. But Serena is probably by far and away the best top carry in the game.
Yeah.
Like main carry in the game,
especially with its passive.
And yeah, I think Serena also is one of the highest skill ceiling characters in the game. But in my opinion, it provides a lot more benefits right now than playing like I do think like Blaziken is strong. Don't get me wrong. I think Blaziken's strong. I think Aegislash can be strong top lane as well. But I think kind of compared to Serena right now, Serena is probably the best scaling top laner in the game.
Right.
It's been at the highest win rates in the game for basically ever since they buffed Stomp about 4 months ago, 5 months ago.
Yeah, baby.
And for a pretty good reason as well. So
okay. Yeah, and the final Pokemon that you would say for competitive players to learn would be
final Pokemon. Maybe I might just have a repeat. I would probably just put Zacian, to be honest.
That's fine. I think the way you described it, having good tools for learning, but that's the thing, right? Like it has good tools to learn, but it also has the tools like if you get really good with them, now you're excelling, right?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, like I said previously, it's the character that can basically do everything. There's nothing the character can't do. And I think it's kind of a character that a lot of people are kind of missing in the champ pools, I guess, right now in competitive. I think Zacian should be a character that every top laner should just be comfortable just picking in any draft, whatever.
Right, of course.
Like I think it's basically just the jack of all trades can do everything character.
Right. And it does it really well too. All right, Overlord. As we're getting to the end, I have 2 silly questions to ask you, and then I'll actually end the show with a serious question. Number 1 question, and this is maybe just a rumor around here, and maybe I just heard it on your stream and I was just curious. But who knows, really? Is it true that it bothers you that if attack weight is not in the first slot?
Yes.
I was there, man. I was like,
oh god.
Like, he's trolling, right? He has to be trolling.
I can't lie. Every time I see someone on my team with attack weight in the 2nd or 3rd slot, I always have to say something. It always just I'm just like I just can't look at it. Like I don't know. Like, every time I just have to point it out. I always, whenever I'm swapping items, you'll notice instead of swapping one item, a lot of times I'll take all 3 items off and put them on in the order that I've like seen them in. I don't know why. It's just a thing. It's just like I just have to see it in that specific spot.
Yeah.
I just have to see the item in that specific spot.
Because a lot of the times I'll lurk in your stream, and I overheard that one day. I think I was working on something, and I'm like, is he serious right now? Because you were like in a 5 stack, and you're like, no, I'm dead serious. Like it needs to be in first. And like I think somebody was like putting on second. Like, no, I forgot who it was. You're like, you need to put that in first. You're literally gonna tilt me if you don't. And it's like, wait, really? Oh my god. So that's one of the silly questions. The other silly question is, this past year at NAIC, we saw something unprecedented, something crazy here. You picked Charizard, and you were the only player because it had a 1% pick rate when you picked it the first time, and even Unite Esports was like, huh? And then you picked it again, and then it went up to 2%. And 2%. I tweeted at Unite Esports, huh? And they retweeted me, which was a highlight of the tournament. But why Charizard? Where was that coming from?
I think in there was a kind of a little bit like a top lane drought last year. I think the meta was kind of basically the same, is getting a little stale. You're basically just seeing the same characters. Nothing much was changing. And I was kind of just like experimenting with picks a lot. I think Charizard was a character that was kind of like, I think Charizard at the time was kind of a little underrated. It might not have been the strongest in terms like stat wise, or maybe kind of looking at like what other all-rounders can do compared to Charizard, but I think what was like really nice about it is kind of its certain matchups. Where you can kind of get away with playing Charizard top lane and kind of just scaling for free based on some matchups. Right. So like, for example, I really liked playing the Garchomp, because I think the way Charizard wanted to play the lane was very, very anti-Garchomp. Right. When Garchomp was kind of a staple pick in the meta at the time. It was. And of course, Charizard has that big Unite move, which is very good, just basically shutting down any hyper carry. And I think, something that kind of goes a little like unnoticed a little bit is like kind of like when you're on stage and everything, and you're kind of playing against Pokemon, or like seeing people kind of like see these Pokemon that kind of have like really, really high impact Unite moves. So like, for example, like Charizard or like Slowbro, right? It can kind of almost like stall out the game. It can kind of make a lot of people, very nervous to kind of go in. If you're just sitting there and holding on the Unite move. Especially like, I know if I've ever played like Leafeon, I am like, I'm not doing anything till I see that Unite move gone. I'm just not. Because the moment it touches me, I'm deleted. I'm ashes. Yep. But I think Charizard was kind of just one of those strange picks, and I'm a believer that I think if you're confident in your pick, then I think that's what's most important. If you're confident in your pick, you think you'll do well, then go for it. I think you'll do well. I love that. Trust your gut. Sometimes you're right, you do have to trust your gut. Last question for you, Overlord, king of games, if you will. You've already made history in Pokemon Unite, but what's next for you? Obviously we know you're going to be part of Reject, but are you going for another title? What is your goal now that you're in a different region with a different team, whole different setting, whole different competitive landscape? What is one goal that's next for you? So I guess like actually like in terms of like winning, obviously I'd really love to win ACL this year. It's like one of the basically the only tournament I haven't won. So I'd really, really like to get a win on that. Of course, going for the world's title and everything. But I'd say like I guess for me, it's kind of more of like a personal goal. It's kind of just, taking on the challenge of, joining a new environment, without any of my previous teammates. Of course, and, in like a new environment where, the language is completely different, right? With
Yeah.
Japanese and everything. My main goal is kind of, kind of just seeing how far I can take, the game, and reject being someone that's outside, someone that has a lot of challenges with like the culture, or like like the language barrier and everything. It's more like a personal goal, just trying to overcome those challenges, and kind of prove that, like, I guess if you can do anything, right, if you put your mind to it. So
Whew. Preach, brother, preach. Is last thing, where can we find you? Where can we keep up to date with everything Overlord? Feel free to plug in anything that you like at this point. This is your space to shout out anybody, anything, any socials. The floor is yours, my guy.
yeah, I mean, I'm basically, I think I'm just Overlord 98 TV on basically every platform. On you can find me on Twitter, X, Twitch, YouTube. I stream every now and then, and on Twitter I'm like active every now and then. Maybe I'll make a few posts,
Especially
but yeah,
during
you can
like
find me
competitive. Yeah.
on there. Oh yeah. But yeah, you can find all updates, keeping everyone up to date. Like I said, streaming every now and then. Now I'm in Japan. If anyone wants to, come out and see, some Japan, the rank that everybody talks about
Right.
as being the best in the world. But yeah.
Okay, well, Overlord, thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much. I think this was an amazing episode to have you on. And again, if you're listening to this or watching this, thank you for watching. This has been the ZeroInOnUnite podcast. Thank you all. Remember, spread love, not hate. Every day above ground is a great day. Remember that. And remember, yesterday is history. Tomorrow is a mystery. Today was a gift. And today's gift was Overlord. And that's why it's called the present. And I hope you've been out there making the most of it. Until next time, trainers, adios.
Bye.